You're listening to Science for Soundness, the podcast. This is not your usual podcast. This is a journey, and as with any journey, I don't know yet where this one is going. If anything, I'm hoping to inspire you to take the first step, even if it's into the unknown, even if you don't know where you're going and you do it scared. Hi, I'm Steffi. I'm an equine scientist and equine therapist. I've made it my mission to support horse owners on their individual journey of horse-human connection and personal growth. I want you to know that I'm with you on this one. Think of me as a friendly voice, a reminder to stay the course, to keep going, keep listening to yourself and to your horse, even when the going gets tough. Let's do this. Hello, and welcome back to Science for Soundness, the podcast. Today I want to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I've seen this pattern emerging of people who have left harsh methods behind but now feel lost when it comes to offering clear boundaries. And I really want to have this conversation with you because I think we're misunderstanding boundaries as something that is completely negative. And we're missing the fact that boundaries aren't just control. Boundaries are also connection if you set them right. So I'm noticing that a lot of people who have previously experienced harsh methods, previously experienced methods that are basically taking full control over the horse and not allowing the horse a voice whatsoever, to methods that offer horses autonomy, which is beautiful. I want to point that out. That's absolutely beautiful. However, what I'm also seeing is this pendulum swing. So if we think of this as a spectrum and we have force-free on one side and then we have total control and domination on the other hand, or on the other side, I see this pendulum swing from one to the other, and we're totally skipping out that middle ground that we're technically always playing in, and we're totally disregarding that. So this pendulum swing goes from dominance to total passivity to, from control and telling the horse how to place every single leg and, not allowing them any voice whatsoever, to just letting them do whatever. And yes, we can do that. We can do that to get horses out of their shell, and we get them to come back into their bodies and start exploring and experiencing things differently again. And that is beautiful, but boundaries are necessary because boundaries are not negative. Boundaries actually offer a safe space. They offer clarity, and clarity again offers safety. They offer a framework, and they allow us to understand our opposite. So if I never set any kind of boundaries, and it doesn't matter if this is in a human-human relationship or with my dogs or also with my horses, if I just allow everyone to completely walk over everything that I am trying to say or feel or express, then I'm slowly but surely becoming smaller and smaller, and my opposite gets to control me. So, we're going from that one extreme to the other. And here's a quiet truth. Boundaries have become a dirty word in some corners of the horse world. But the truth is, your horse really needs your boundaries just as much as they need your softness. So, as always, I'm asking you to find a balance. And here's my core idea. Boundaries aren't about control at all. They're about safety for both of you, for both your nervous systems. Let's talk about something that is probably very little thought of when we're thinking about boundaries. And that is that our nervous systems are wired to scan for cues of safety, danger, and threat. So in relationships, it doesn't, again, matter whether it is horse-horse, horse-human, whether it's your dog, clear boundaries, I've previously mentioned that, but clear boundaries create predictability in that relationship. And predictability, again, creates safety. If my horse knows, so Rubio, for example, who is he knows exactly where he ends and I begin, but he's very interested in coming closer. If I was to let him do that again and again and again and again, then this conversation would be very one-sided. Like he'd always get what he wants and I constantly have my space invaded. So I have to have this conversation with him in order to be predictable in what he can expect from me. Like I'm not lashing out. I'm just, gently guiding him back towards a space where we can both safely interact again. And that is really, really important, because when we are unclear, inconsistent, or even avoidant of setting boundaries, and I think that is a biggie for a lot of us, this means we're creating ambiguity, and ambiguity equals threat to the nervous system because it's unpredictable, it doesn't make sense, and there is no way of detecting when and how it's going to happen, which is feeling unsafe. So boundaries are super, super important because they create relational clarity for us. And just think about it. Think of the relationships in your life. Think of your partner, your work colleagues. Think of your friends. You probably have more friends and different friend groups. Think of those. Think of your horse or horses if you have multiple. Same with your dogs, or single dog, multiple dogs. Think of all the different kinds of relationships that you're entering and how you're showing up in those. Relationships are all of them. So it could be, friendship, partner, horse. It doesn't matter to me. They're all relationships. But if you think about one or two where maybe you don't feel so safe when you're alone with that particular individual because maybe they're overstepping your boundaries, or maybe you feel very bad trying to say no, or maybe you're trying to keep the peace by staying quiet, and think about how that makes you feel and what kind of message that gives your nervous system over and over again. So the same goes for our horses, and therefore it's really important, especially if you're the main go-to character in their lives, the main relationship with another human they have. It's really important that it's a safe one. It's important that it's a clear one, so there is clarity in it, and consistency and boundaries are part of that. I think they're absolutely necessary. And like I said, this pendulum swings from the one thing, from this total domination and control and compliance, over to almost being passive, force-free. But the thing is, force-free doesn't mean boundary-free. There is a difference. Force-free often gets misinterpreted as no boundaries, as boundary-free and complete autonomy for the horse. And this often leads to people feeling walked over, or horses escalating their behavior because they're unclear. So if you don't give your horse feedback, and again, boundaries are feedback, if you don't give them feedback at all, then their behavior is just going to get louder and louder and more and more and more. And if you don't understand them and then all of a sudden you throw out a boundary, that is very, very unclear. That makes no sense to them. And it also leads to relationship breakdown because we have this rupture, because we have this moment of what the hell is going on. For example, think of a horse, or maybe that's even yours. I've already shared Rubio is one of them. Think of a horse that crowds into your space repeatedly and you don't want it, but because you want to be kind to them and you're trying to be nice and compassionate in that moment, you're not wanting to correct them. That is actually a problem, because what usually happens is that the horse then comes closer because we're not setting a boundary. We're not saying, hey, this is a little bit too close for me, maybe you can step back a little. And because we're not doing that, there is nothing that says stay away, and therefore they maybe come closer again. And maybe all of a sudden they're totally in your space, and some of us might enjoy that, but some of us might not enjoy if our horses are that close, because again, this requires having a conversation around boundaries when it comes to stuff like putting your teeth on me, putting your lips on me, nuzzling me, things like that. It's really, really important, because if we don't set boundaries there, then the horse might even try and connect in a different way. And again, coming closer and making a move towards you, trying to physically connect with you, there are all attempts to connect in some way or another. And then what usually happens is the horse might come a little bit too close. Then all of a sudden, our thinking brain might think, okay, but I don't want to correct them because I want to be very kind to them and I want them to have autonomy in this conversation, which is beautiful. But your body might feel completely overstimulated. It might actually detect this is a threat, this is danger, because they're way too close and we don't feel comfortable with that. What can happen from that space is that we either lash out verbally, physically. We might really yank the head collar backwards and put them in their place because they've overstepped the boundary. And then I want to ask you, how is that predictable? How is that clear and consistent for your horse? Does it make sense? Because I want to argue that it doesn't make sense. I want to argue that if we don't have boundaries in place from the start, if we don't have this conversation or these multiple conversations around boundaries with our horses, what we are creating is a mess. And then somewhere down the line, horses get labeled as unpredictable, or they get mislabeled, I might like to add. They get mislabeled as difficult or being naughty or, you name it. It's not fair, because it's basically the human backing out from having a difficult conversation and the horse having to face the consequence. So lack of boundaries doesn't create connection. In fact, it's the complete opposite. It creates confusion and from there conflict, which is totally frustrating for the human as well, because in this conversation, we actually wanted the best for our horses, but now we've created a situation that needs to be worked on deeply and in ways that we feel uncomfortable with. Because we didn't want to have that little uncomfortable conversation at the beginning, it's now become a really big conversation. And often we need help with that. If we look at horses in herd environments, and I'm really hoping that your horse is in a herd environment, and I hope that they have social connections and social soundness, therefore, horses crave healthy boundaries. I mean, part of the whole reason why Rubio keeps approaching me and asking, or used to ask these questions, not anymore so much because we've had this conversation, but part of the reason why he was doing this constantly is to check out the boundaries, and he wanted this framework almost. So if you look at the herd dynamics, they are full of boundaries. There are so many different personalities in each herd with so many different tasks that they take on and so many different approaches to these tasks. Sometimes they're more gentle, sometimes they're less gentle, but still all of these horses in a healthy herd environment have a communication going constantly. If I just observe my horses in particular, they are very different in their communication. Rubio is very straightforward. Sun is very, very gentle. She will diffuse any conflict there is and make sure that she's like the peacekeeper in there, which is beautiful. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness. But she does this by physically setting a boundary. For example, when she goes between two horses and says, stop. I mean, she doesn't say it, but everything in her presence basically says stop. And then all of a sudden the horses stop doing what they're doing and they go about their way, and she basically set a boundary. We see Ravi, who is so sensitive, and whenever Rubio is approaching him, Ravi, he doesn't go into conflict. He basically does a little tail swish and then he removes himself from the situation because he cannot be in that conflict situation. That's not where he feels comfortable. And then when I look at Rubio, he will just very clearly put someone in their place if they try and cross him. And he said no already via, for example, a flick of an ear, and he tossed his head, and then he will just nip them and tell them. So they're very different personalities, but there are boundaries all the time because they too are navigating each other's spaces and their bubbles, and it's important that they are respected, because only if they are respected and everybody gets to voice their opinion, we have a healthy, balanced system. And the same goes for us, really. That's what we want, a healthy and balanced system. Boundaries in this regulated system, in this balanced system, they are clear, they're consistent, and they are also, and that's really important, that's something that we humans probably could take a big slice of, and that is they are emotionally neutral. They're not emotionally charged like with us. So if a horse crosses our boundaries, we might snap into survival mode and lash out and be loud and scream at them or yank the head collars back, like I said. Whilst the horse will go from 0 to 100 and then back to 0. And it just is. There is no emotional backlash from it. It's neutral. And I just want to point out, which is I think really, really important, your horse doesn't need you to be harsh with them. None of this that I'm saying is telling you to now completely put down your foot and just be harsh and go back to the control kind of environment. That is not what I'm asking you to do, but they do need you to be congruent. And that means find out for yourself, what do you actually need in that moment? If they're crowding you, if you feel like they're invading your space, what do you need in that moment? Do you need them to step back a bit? Do you need to take yourself out of that environment by any chance? What is there that you can do in that particular moment to offer yourself a little bit of support? And what do you need to be congruent in setting those boundaries? So boundaries basically say, you're safe with me because I'm clear. Because you over and over and over say the same thing and you're not changing that because of different circumstances. You're predictable. You're safe. Something that might probably shock a few of you, and that is that your personal history with boundaries matters in this context. Because many of us were never taught healthy boundaries, especially when I'm looking at the fellow ladies out there. We have been conditioned to be nice and amenable and, keep our heads down and all of that stuff. And the thing is, we don't just bring these patterns into our relationships with other humans, becoming people pleasers because we're afraid to say no and set a boundary. Then we start fawning constantly in social situations. We don't just bring that into the human side of things, we also bring that into our horsemanship. And that's what I feel like changes the conversation, because you might avoid conflict, over-explain yourself, overcompensate things, or even collapse. And that's okay, because it's learned. It's not fixed in you, that behavior. That is a learned strategy. So I feel like my horses have been my greatest teachers throughout this journey of coming to understand, who am I in this world? What makes me me, and what parts of me are maybe conditioned? What parts of me aren't even mine? What masks have I taken on that don't belong to me? And your horse has the potential to be your greatest teacher in that journey as well. Your safest place to learn boundary setting is probably your horse, because they will not have any opinions and they will always be who they are, and they will always be predictable in that way. And you don't have to fear the emotional backlash that comes with it, because they're always going to be emotionally neutral, which is beautiful. So use that as your playing field to explore with yourself as well, not just with your horse. Something that we should think about is what boundaries actually sound and feel like, because I think that a lot of us have different ideas of what that might be. Boundaries can be, I need more space right now. And in my world, that is not just with the horses, that is also communicated to humans. So it doesn't matter if it's your partner in a friendship or in a work environment. If you need some space to work on something, focus on something, or genuinely just need some time away from a situation, you have the right to say that. And you can say, I need more space right now. I'll talk to you tomorrow or later. I don't know. It's nice to give like a time frame, I guess. But you can also tell your horse, I need more space right now. So when they're crowding you, you can gently guide them back towards a distance that feels good for you, that feels safer. And keep repeating that conversation. You will find, I have yet to meet a horse that doesn't stop asking. So even Rubio, and I mean, this guy is really insisting on coming very close and was very insistent. Even he understood when I put the energy towards guiding him back, and we do this like 5 or 6 or 7 times even. At some point, he'll stop asking. He'll be like, okay, I'll be here. you're there. That's fine. And that is me having this difficult conversation. That is me guiding him towards that space that feels safer for me right now, towards setting a boundary when it comes to my own personal bubble. And that's fine. That's okay. Boundaries can also be, I'm happy to connect with you, but not while I feel pushed. Pick a time and a place for those conversations. So you can tell, what a genuine thing to say to someone is, I'm happy to connect with you and have this conversation, but not whilst I feel pushed. Give me a minute, give me a break, give me, I don't know, I'll get back to you later in an hour. Tonight I go for a walk and then I'll come back to this conversation. Whatever works for you, but that is a very clear communication of a boundary. And again, it's the same for the horse. Happy to connect with you. I'm happy to stand beside you, but I don't want your face in my face, maybe, but I'm happy to have my hand on your neck. How about that? So you're not being pushed away by them, and at the same time you're offering something instead, which is beautiful. Boundaries can also be in the middle of a storm. So when I say that right now, I mean a discussion. So that could be a conflict between you and your horse, you and your partner, you and your friend, you and your colleague, your child, your dog, your cat, it doesn't matter. You could say, I'm here, I see you, and I'm not moving until we're both settled. So especially when it comes to your horse, the thing is that if they escalate, we very quickly feel intimidated, and then we might lash out more and go into this fight ourselves. So we're all in survival mode, and then we're fighting with each other, and it just doesn't stop. And the same kind of happens with our partners, again, humans. If we're in that conflict, in the middle of that storm, it's very, very easy to get swept away by it and to just ride that emotional wave and be in survival alongside them. How about one of us offers a boundary by saying, I'm not going to ride that wave of emotional thunder with you. I'm going to be here and I'm happy to connect with you, but I would like us to both be settled again. I would like us to both be breathing properly again before we do that. And what I do with my horses in those moments is, so when San, Rubio, or Ravi are starting, or clients' horses even, are starting to be completely frazzled and out of their bodies because of something, it doesn't matter what triggered the response, the result is the same thing, and that's survival, and that in that case can be something like flight. So them rushing around, running around, bucking, bolting, again, doesn't matter, just to paint a picture here. But if they do that, have you ever tried staying calm in that process and offering space for them to express safely, but at the same time not riding that wave with them, and instead setting a boundary there as well by remaining steadfast? I feel like it makes all the difference. It really does. So especially with that last example, I think it becomes clear that boundaries can also be offered rather than enforced. So maybe that helps you shift your mindset around boundaries a little bit, because it's not just something that I enforce like a rule. It's more like an offering. It's more like these are my terms. Are you happy to enter conversation with them? So it is still a conversation, but I'm allowed to have my terms in them. And the other thing I've already mentioned as well, but boundaries are felt in your body first, and then they're offered through intention and energy and action. So you feel them, and that is the moment when you actually have to follow that nudge from your body. That is also how you start trusting yourself more, because you feel that nudge in your body, and then you are offering through intention, energy, and action that boundary because you feel it in your body first. And that self-trust you develop in that process is invaluable, not just for your horsemanship, but also for any relationship that you have. So you might be wondering, how do I begin setting boundaries? Because it feels kind of scary right now, and I totally get that. Boundaries are so individual and so unique to each and every one of us. There is like with everything I do, there is no way of giving you here's how to set boundaries, here are your 5 steps, and then you'll have it all sorted. However, what I can say is try and regulate first, because your boundaries are only as strong as your regulations. So think back to your horse being completely freaked out and overstepping a boundary, or, maybe whizzing around. Think about a situation like that. If you are riding that emotional wave, and if you are in survival as well, you are not speaking or setting boundaries from a regulated place. You are actually in survival as well. So they don't really ring true for your horse in that moment. And also humans or, children, doesn't matter. Dogs, cats. I know I keep repeating that, but it's very important because people very often like to just get stuck on that one thing. But I want you to understand how it applies to every relationship that you have. So regulate first, because your boundaries are only as strong as that. Start small. So when I say that, think about the horse that wants to be close, like Rubio, and tends to invade your space a little bit. I'm not going to label horses like that pushy or anything like that. And if I do, then it's always ever in air quotes. These horses are desperately trying to connect with you through physical touch, very likely. So, in those moments, what you can do is use physical space to put a boundary between you. It could be a fence line, but it could also be just you gently guiding them back towards a distance that feels safer for you. And that will require not just a physical space, but also time, because it's not just done in a single session usually, because these horses deeply want to connect for a reason, and often we have to find out that reason in order to understand them at a deeper level and be able to help them at the root of that situation. And also it will require energy, because if I'm not in the right space or frame of mind, if I'm not feeling up to it, then these kind of conversations can very quickly escalate. So if I don't have the energy for it, if I'm not in the right frame of mind, then I'm not going to enter these conversations. I'm trying to do that deliberately. So start small and try and be mindful of whether you're regulated or not. I asked you earlier, what do you need in those moments? Something you can do for yourself is practice naming those needs out loud. So when you're in a situation that feels sticky with your horse, let's again say they're crowding you or they're exploding and you're overwhelmed with that situation, and your first reaction would be to react and to yank or to, just be really loud and bold in that expression. If you can take a deep breath, try and regulate first, calm down again, come back to that balanced, regulated state, and then ask yourself, what do I need right now? And then just tell yourself what it is, because often these are suppressed needs that we have and we're used to not being met. So maybe we're used to being bulldozed over by other people, and our horse is triggering that possibly. So ask yourself, what do you need? And then name that out loud. I feel like that helps, even if it's just to yourself. It doesn't have to be for anyone else, just for you, because it will help you. And then let your horse be part of that co-regulation, not the casualty of that dysregulation of yours or theirs, or, allow them to be part of that conversation, even when we're just speaking co-regulation, just in air quotes again, because it's a massive part of what we do. Allow them to take part in that breathing. Allow them to lean in when, for example, you're offering, instead of allowing them in your face, maybe you're offering your hand on their neck. Allow them to be part in that and then see what happens with it. Because that, I feel like, is where a lot of the magic happens, when the horses start leaning in and we're leaning in and we become more attuned to each other, and then we develop this common language with each other where the boundaries are very subtle and just effortlessly communicated, but it is a process and we kind of have to start somewhere. And I feel like we can start by firstly finding out what we need and then also what our horses need. So if they desperately want to connect, but we don't want them in our face, where is the alternative? So let them be part of that co-regulation. So to recap, boundaries are not something to be seen as negative or controlling. Boundaries are love in action. And I mean, if not love, then what are they? If I'm offering my horse a conversation, if I'm offering myself the same kind of space that I'm offering my horse, if not love for my opposite and also for myself, what is that? And also in that relational context, they offer safety. And I want the people I love the most to feel safe around me. And I'll always show up for the people and the animals that I love with authenticity, integrity, and yes, also boundaries, but they're grounded in a willingness to have conversations with each other, not in an attempt to control my opposite. It's about what happens in between. And I feel like boundaries offer that space to fully open up. If we try and not have boundaries at all, it's not a conversation anymore. It's a very one-sided conversation. And it swings from us dominating the conversation to our horse dominating the conversation, which, that pendulum I spoke about, it's not going to solve the problem, and it's also not going to help us create a safer setting. So boundaries are what allow your relationship to deepen, not actually shut it down, because that is what happens when either of us has like total control and domination over that conversation. Then we shut the other person or the horse down, and they do that to us as well if we're not heard and seen and felt in that conversation. So always try and find that balance. And if this conversation resonated with you, then I would love to welcome you inside the Holistic Horsemanship Academy. It's my membership space where we dive deeper into topics like boundaries. There is a full course on boundaries actually as well. And just genuinely love connecting with each other, with our horses, and find meaning between the lines and find ways and means that honor our horses' personality, their spirit, as well as our own. So if that sounds interesting, then use the code podcast at the checkout to save €10 on your first month or your full membership for a year. Friends, let your boundaries be your bridge, not your wall. It's not the end of the story. It is actually very much part of it. And I'll see you next time. Hi friend, I hope you found something in this episode that resonated with you. I'm beyond grateful that you hung out with me today for a little while, and I do hope that you come along for the ride. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and if you feel like it, leave a review. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. If you have any questions or would like me to talk about a certain topic, check the show notes for ways to get in touch. I can't wait for next time. You got this.